Welcome to Reform Thinking. I'm your host, and I'm really excited to get into our topic today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm the resident theology guy for this deep dive, and we have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. So I want you, the listener, to imagine something for a second. Imagine holding the absolute highest security clearance in the entire universe.
Right.
Like you have administrative access to the whole physical world.
Okay, yeah.
But you occupy a body that can be taken out by, a microscopic virus.
It is such a wild thing to think about.
Right. It's this bizarre paradox, and it's actually the exact paradox that ancient scholars wrestled with when they looked at the human condition.
Oh, totally.
Because there's this really specific, almost universal experience that happens when you step outside on a clear night, like a really dark night, far away from all the city lights, and you just look up.
Yeah, you see that vast, expansive star.
Well, precisely. You see the sheer scale of the cosmos stretching out in every direction.
And it hits you physically, doesn't it?
It really does. You get this immediate reaction. You just feel vanishingly small.
Right.
It's this feeling of utter insignificance in the face of something staggeringly huge.
It's overwhelming.
It is. So today we are doing a deep dive into John F. Walvoord's Bible knowledge commentary on Psalm 8.
A fantastic resource, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And we want to see what happens when you take that common human experience of looking at the night sky and you run it through the lens of ancient Hebrew poetry.
And some really rigorous theological analysis.
Right. So we have a clear mission for this audio session. We are examining the striking tension between God's absolute majesty and his completely unexpected decision to use frail, mortal humanity as his earthly representative.
Which makes no sense on paper.
Right, it really doesn't. But whether you study theology intensely or you just find yourself marveling at the night sky from time to time, this commentary gives you a brilliant framework.
It gives you a lens to view your own position in the universe.
Yeah. We are looking at a text where the author, King David, is staring at the sky and coming to some massive conclusions about the original design of humanity.
So to set the theological backdrop for you, the listener, based on Walvoord's analysis, we have to understand where David's mind is positioned when he writes this psalm.
Okay, set the stage for us.
Right. So David is looking at mankind's dignity, but he isolates it, specifically prior to factoring in the chaos and rebellion brought about by the fall.
Oh, interesting. So he's looking pre-fall.
Yeah, he observes the blueprint of humanity's role as God's representative on earth. When you read the commentary, you realize Walvoord stresses this point heavily.
Okay.
David marvels that the glorious Lord of heaven would graciously use people in the earth's dominion.
Right. He looks at the unblemished mandate given to humanity.
Setting aside, just for a moment, the devastating consequences of sin that we experience every single day, it creates this pristine, almost breathtaking view of what human beings were actually designed to be.
I think blueprint is a really helpful word there. Yeah, but I actually prefer to think of it like a computer's operating system.
Oh, I like that. Run with that. So, in the original design, humanity was installed as the administrative OS of the earth.
Right, with root access.
Exactly. We were given total managerial control over the hardware of the planet.
Right.
But then, a malicious code, the fall, was downloaded.
And it corrupted our admin privileges.
Precisely. We still have the hardware, and we still have the lingering architecture of the software.
But the system is glitching violently.
Yes, glitching violently. And David, in this psalm, is looking past the glitching software and reading the original code.
That is a great way to visualize it.
And he frames this entire observation by establishing the unshakable reality of God's character.
Right.
I love how Walvoord points out the structure here in verses 1 and 9 of Psalm 8.
The bookends.
Yes, the bookends. The psalm begins and ends with the identical exclamation.
Oh, Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth.
Right. It is identical at the beginning and the end.
Which is very deliberate. Very. If we think about cinematic structure, it operates like the opening and closing credits of a film.
Oh, sure.
When a director chooses a specific visual style or like a musical motif for the opening sequence, and then they mirror it in the closing credits, they are making a deliberate choice.
They dictate the overarching theme of the work.
Right. They ensure that everything you watch in the middle of that film is viewed through the specific lens they established at the start.
And David does the exact same thing here.
He does. Everything we discuss about stars, human frailty, dominion, it all sits inside these bookends of God's absolute majesty.
And the linguistic details within those bookends are just fascinating when we slow down to analyze them.
Let's dig into that.
Let's look at the word study Walvoord provides for verse 1.
Okay.
When we see the English phrase, "O Lord, our Lord," it looks visually repetitive.
Yeah, it just looks like he's repeating himself.
Right. But in the original Hebrew, David makes a highly specific theological statement.
Okay, break that down for us.
First, he addresses God by his personal revealed name.
The one that's usually in all capital letters in English Bibles.
Yes, exactly. L-O-R-D in all caps.
Mm-hmm.
This translates the Hebrew word Yahweh.
Okay.
This represents the covenantal name of God, the great I am.
The self-existent creator.
Right, the one who personally revealed himself to his people. It carries the weight of intimacy and relational promise, but then immediately following that personal name, David uses a completely different word.
Which is what?
He uses ajay,
Okay.
which translates as our Lord with lowercase letters.
So what's the difference?
Well, this word ajane stresses God as the sovereign or the master.
Oh, I see.
It carries the weight of absolute ownership and unchallengeable authority.
Right.
It was a term often used in ancient Near Eastern context to describe a king who held the lives of his subjects in his hands.
I want to pause on that juxtaposition because it seems incredibly deliberate.
Oh, it absolutely is.
We have Yahweh, the God who draws near, who makes promises, who knows his people intimately.
Right.
And that name is placed right next to Achne, the unquestionable sovereign who owns everything.
Yes, side by side.
It eliminates any notion of a distant, detached deity while simultaneously destroying the idea of, a casual, manageable, cosmic buddy.
Yes. You can't domesticate this God.
The God who intimately knows his people is the exact same God who owns the cosmos.
And Walvoord points out that the word majestic here suggests splendor and magnificence.
It creates this massive, towering image of authority.
It really does. But Walvoord also brings up a linguistic puzzle at the end of that first verse.
Oh, right, the translation issue.
Yeah, and it shows how intricate the biblical text can be. He notes a translation challenge in the Hebrew.
What's the issue?
Well, the text actually uses an imperative verb.
A command.
Right, a command. But most modern translations, like the NIV, treat it as an infinitive.
Okay.
They render it as a statement of fact. You have set your glory above the heavens.
So why do translators struggle with this? And what does it imply about God's glory?
So the difficulty arises because the grammatical form in the ancient manuscript is unusual for this specific context.
How so?
An imperative usually functions as a command, like, set your glory above the heavens.
Like asking God to do something he hasn't done yet.
Precisely. However, the context of the surrounding verses heavily implies an established reality rather than a request for future action.
Ah, I see.
Translators, looking at the entire thought progression of the psalm, recognize that David states a current, unshakable fact about God's nature.
His glory already spans the heavens.
Yes, it is massive, untouchable, and supreme. The linguistic tension highlights the sheer magnitude of the claim. The heavens, which represented the absolute limit of human observation and understanding in the ancient world, are simply the floorboards of God's glory.
Wow, the floorboards of God's glory.
Yeah, His Majesty sits above the highest conceivable realm.
See, establishing that heaven-spanning massive glory makes verse 2 so incredibly jarring.
It is a massive pivot.
It really is. We go from the highest heights of cosmic majesty straight down to basically a nursery.
Yeah, it's quite the tonal shift.
David writes, and Walvoord analyzes this thought. God uses the strength of children and infants to silence his enemies.
The foe and the avenger.
Right. And I have to ask the logical question on behalf of anyone listening right now.
Go for it.
If God possesses the immense heaven-spanning glory we just talked about,
Yeah.
Why use infants?
It's a great question.
I mean, why not use an army of angels?
Right.
Why not use a thunderstorm or an earthquake or some massive celestial event to silence cosmic rebellion?
You'd think that would be the go-to move.
Exactly. I was thinking about this, and it reminds me of a grandmaster playing in a global chess tournament.
Okay, I track with that.
Imagine a scenario where the grandmaster is playing against this bitter, arrogant rival. The grandmaster has his queen, his rooks, his knights. He has massive advantages on the board.
All the heavy hitters.
Right. But instead of crushing his opponent with his most capable pieces, he announces a checkmate in 5 moves using only his pawns.
Oh, man.
He deliberately uses the weakest, most easily dismissed pieces on the board to completely dismantle his opponent.
That is brutal.
It results in the total humiliation of the enemy.
Whoa.
It proves that the victory relies entirely on the brilliance of the master, not the inherent capability of the individual pieces.
I love that. And taking that chess analogy a step further, the use of the pawn not only humiliates the opponent, but it completely redefines the nature of the conflict.
What do you mean?
Well, the opponent expects a battle of heavy artillery,
Right.
and instead they get defeated by foot soldiers.
Wow, yeah.
This aligns perfectly with the broader biblical theology Walvoord references here.
What does he point to?
When Walvoord analyzes this verse, he points us straight to a cross-reference in the New Testament.
Okay.
1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27.
What does Paul say there?
The Apostle Paul writes that God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong.
Okay, yeah.
The Lord ordains the weakest elements to confound those who think they have leverage. By using frail, mortal humanity represented in its most vulnerable state as children and infants to silence his enemies, God displays his own absolute sufficiency.
Because the infant isn't strong on its own.
Exactly. The victory occurs not because the infant possesses inherent might, but because the sovereign God operates through them.
Right.
The enemy is silenced precisely because they are defeated by something they considered utterly beneath their notice.
You know, that upends modern psychology completely.
Well, 100%.
Today, the cultural mandate tells us to hide weakness and to project total competence.
Never let them see you sweat.
Right. We spend vast amounts of energy trying to convince everyone around us that we are capable, independent, and strong.
We build these massive facades.
We do. But this ancient text argues that projecting capability actually acts as a barrier to fulfilling your original design.
That is a fascinating way to put it.
And here's where the translation of that verse gets really interesting. Yes. Walvoord notes that the NIV translates the Hebrew word is, which typically means strength, as the word praise. So the NIV reads, "Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold."
Right.
Why would translators shift from a word meaning physical strength to a word meaning vocal praise?
It seems strange at first glance.
It seems like a massive leap.
It does seem like a leap, until you look at how the ancient writers understood the mechanism of strength in relation to God.
Okay, unpack that.
Walvoord provides excellent insight here. He explains that strength, in this specific context, indicates praise for God's strength.
Oh, I see.
The weakness of the child vocalizing dependence and awe becomes the very vehicle that establishes God's fortress against his foes.
So the praise is the strength.
Exactly. The vocal acknowledgement of God's sovereignty by the most helpless members of society constitutes a stronghold.
Wow.
And to validate this interpretation, Walvoord points us to the Gospel of Matthew.
Okay, where in Matthew?
Chapter 21, verses 15 and 16.
During the triumphal entry.
Yes. Jesus enters the temple area. The religious leaders who function as the arrogant foes in this context, by the way.
Right, they're the bad guys here.
They are indignant at the children shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David." When they challenge Jesus about it, he directly quotes this exact verse from the Greek translation of Psalm 8, the Septuagint.
Oh, wow.
Jesus says, "Have you never read, from the lips of children and infants you, Lord, have called forth your praise?"
So Jesus himself validates the translation choice.
He absolutely does. The vocal praise coming from the most vulnerable, dependent members of society is the precise mechanism God uses to silence arrogant opposition.
The weakness itself is the weapon.
Yes.
That concept completely shifts how we view our own limitations.
It really should.
Your weakness, your vulnerability, is actually the chosen vehicle to represent his might on earth.
Because it leaves no room for human boasting.
Right. God is not looking for human heavyweights to win his battles.
No, he isn't.
He looks for dependents who will accurately reflect his glory.
That is spot on.
Having established humanity from the perspective of weakness in verse 2, David shifts his gaze again.
Right, he pans the camera back up.
Exactly. He moves from the weakness of an infant to the literal physical smallness of mankind when compared to the vastness of the cosmos in verses 3 and 4. He writes, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place."
Such poetic imagery.
It is. And I want to stop on that phrase, the work of your fingers, because the imagery is so striking.
Yeah, let's look at that.
When a human builds something massive like a skyscraper, a dam, or even, the ancient pyramids,
Right.
it requires heavy machinery, sweat, immense labor, decades of toil.
Massive effort.
Yes, it requires the full strength of the back and the arm. But David looks at the entirety of the cosmos, the galaxies, the planets, the infinite expanse of space, and describes it as the work of God's fingers.
The contrast there is just staggering.
It really is.
Fingerwork implies effortless precision. It implies that creating the universe was akin to God doing delicate embroidery.
Or like tuning a musical instrument.
Yes, and in ancient Near Eastern literature, the creation of the world by various mythological gods usually involved cosmic warfare.
Right, like Marduk and Tiamat and all that.
Exactly. It involved intense struggle, exhaustion, gods battling sea monsters and ripping them apart to form the sky and the earth.
It was a messy, exhausting process for those false gods.
Right. But the biblical text strips all that away.
Mm-hmm.
The sovereign master simply uses his fingers.
Wow.
He sets the moon and the stars in place with the ease of a jeweler setting a small stone into a ring.
That is a beautiful image.
It highlights the staggering disparity between the creator and the creation. The heavens are vast to us, but they are delicate fingerwork to him.
And sitting under that staggering, effortlessly created canopy, David asks the central question of the psalm in verse 4.
A big question.
What is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? Let's look at the specific words David uses here, because Walvoord provides a brilliant Hebrew insight into the text that changes the tone of the question entirely.
He really does.
If you dig into the original Hebrew here, the word used for man isn't just a generic term for a human.
Right.
It's no.
Yes, the Hebrew language utilizes several different words for humanity, and the selection of nosh carries massive theological weight.
Break that down for us.
This word does not mean a generic human being, like the word Adam might in certain contexts,
Okay.
or a strong man, like the word ish.
So what does it mean?
The word nosh specifically means mortal, weak man.
Oh, wow.
It derives from a root word associated with sickness, frailty, and mortality.
So it's focusing on our breakability.
Exactly. It carries the connotation of something that is passing away, something inherently breakable and desperately vulnerable.
So David isn't just saying, what is a human?
No. David asks a highly specific question. He says, when I look at the permanent, glowing, massive celestial bodies you spun into existence with your fingers,
Right.
why do you pay any attention to this fragile, decaying, weak creature down in the dirt?
Man, anyone who has ever looked through a telescope or seen those incredible deep space images from the James Webb Space Telescope understands that feeling.
Oh, definitely.
We occupy a tiny rock suspended in a sunbeam.
Barely a speck.
And yet, verse 4 uses these rhetorical questions to set up an incredible paradox.
Which is what?
You are a finite, mortal being, you are Mushal, yet the creator of all of those galaxies cares immensely for you.
He really does.
He not only thinks about you, but he entrusts you with massive responsibility.
And David's amazement here has a direct parallel elsewhere in Scripture.
Right. It does. Walvoord connects this verse to Psalm 144.3,
Okay.
which echoes the exact same sentiment. Lord, what are human beings that you care for them, mere mortals that you think of them?
Right. It's a recurring theme.
It is. This recurring theme in biblical theology highlights a radical departure from surrounding ancient cultures.
How so?
Well, in human hierarchies, the king rarely concerns himself with the peasants,
Right.
let alone entrusts his kingdom to them.
Right.
In Babylonian or Canaanite mythology, the gods viewed humans as noisy annoyances.
Or slave labor.
Exactly. At best, slave labor created to dig irrigation canals so the gods could rest. But the biblical text asserts that the Lord of the universe focuses his attention squarely on mortal, weak man with intense care and purpose.
The Creator's deliberate, intimate focus on finite creatures continually astonishes the biblical writers.
Because it makes no sense to them.
Right, because it defies all human logic regarding authority and control.
So if we are genuinely that fragile, if our physical bodies are essentially just dust, it begs a massive logistical question.
Which is?
How can a sovereign God possibly entrust the management of a chaotic earth to something so breakable?
Yeah, that is the question.
Which is precisely the paradox the ancient texts try to resolve.
Yeah.
They categorize humanity not by our physical strength, but by our assigned rank.
Okay, let's get into the rank.
This brings us to verse 5 and a fascinating translation debate that Walvoord unpacks for us.
Oh, this is a big one.
He introduces the assertion that man was created with dignity and might, positioned, as the text says, a little lower than God. But that phrase sits at the center of a major theological debate concerning how we translate a single Hebrew word.
Right. The debate centers entirely over the Hebrew word hishim in verse 5.
Okay, explain what's going on there.
It represents one of the more significant translation decisions in the Old Testament.
Why is it so significant?
Because if you read different English translations, you see vastly different words used here.
Give us some examples.
The ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, translated hishim as angels.
Okay.
The historic King James Version followed that tradition, rendering it, "You made him a little lower than the angels."
Right, that's what most people are familiar with.
Exactly. But then the New International Version takes a slightly different approach, translating it as heavenly beings.
Why are they all translating it differently?
Translators historically felt nervous about saying humanity was made a little lower than God himself.
Nervous. Why?
They feared it elevated mankind too high, or blurred the lines between the creator and the creature.
They thought it sounded almost blasphemous.
Right, it made them uncomfortable.
But Walvoord argues against that nervous translation, doesn't he?
He strongly argues against it.
He takes a very specific stance on the primary meaning of that word.
He argues that while the word yeshing can, in some very rare and specific contexts, refer to spiritual rulers or judges,
Okay.
its primary overwhelming meaning throughout the entire Old Testament is simply God.
Right, like in Genesis 1.
Exactly. It functions as the plural form used to denote the majestic God of Israel, the same word used in Genesis 1.1. In the beginning, God, Yeshim, created the heavens and the earth.
So why change it here?
Walvoord asserts you shouldn't. He says, God is the intended meaning right here in Psalm 8.
Wow.
Man was made a little lower than God himself.
That is a massive statement.
He argues that translating it as angels dilutes the staggering point David tries to make about humanity's original pre-fall dignity.
I have to admit, I struggle with this little lower than God translation.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, specifically regarding the implication that humanity outranks angels.
Ah, I see where you're going.
If humanity sits higher than angels in the created order, why does the rest of the Bible constantly show humans falling on their faces in absolute terror whenever an angel shows up?
That's a very fair point.
Think about Daniel, or the shepherds at Christmas, or Mary.
Right.
They are paralyzed with fear.
Terrified.
It seems like practical physical experience contradicts this proposed hierarchy.
Hmm.
How does Walvoord, or biblical theology in general, reconcile the idea that we outrank beings that terrify us?
So that tension points right back to the distinction between the original blueprint and the current glitching software.
Ah, the OS analogy again?
Right. We have to separate positional authority from our current fallen state.
Okay, unpack that positional authority.
Positionally, in the original design, mankind was exalted to an astonishing place of honor. When God created the world, he did not hand the keys to the angelic host.
He didn't.
No. He created finite, mortal man made from the dust of the ground.
Right.
And he placed him in the garden to act as the sovereign's direct ambassador, the vice-regent over the physical earth.
Wow. So angels have a different role entirely.
Yes. Angels function as ministering spirits, operating largely in the unseen realm.
Okay.
But humanity received the mandate to rule the physical realm. Mankind was positioned lower than God, but held the highest rank within the physical creation.
So the terror humans feel when encountering angels happens because we're currently operating in our fractured, mortal, no state,
Exactly.
confronting beings who retain their uncorrupted power.
That's spot on.
Going back to the OS analogy, it's like we still hold the title of system administrator, but we are currently locked out of the mainframe,
Yes.
and we're sitting in the server room watching the security protocols the angels operate with full access.
That is exactly what it's like. We have this beautiful, pristine, original design where humanity, frail as we are physically, is crowned with glory and honor.
Positioned directly under God to manage the earth.
Right. But the blueprint does not match the building we currently occupy.
The original design was beautiful, but the current reality is chaotic.
Very chaotic.
We have to look at verses 6 through 8, where the text transitions from the ideal mandate to the reality of human rebellion.
And to understand the fracture, Walvoord takes us all the way back to the beginning.
Back to Genesis.
Right, to the cultural mandate in Genesis 1.28.
Okay, remind us what that says.
God commanded Adam and Eve to have dominion over all the earth. The text explicitly tells them to rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground.
So total authority over the animal kingdom.
Total. They functioned as the appointed rulers, operating as Yoshim's representatives on earth. Every living creature without exception, was meant to be subjugated under their benevolent, God-reflecting rule.
The animals were supposed to look at humanity and see a perfect reflection of the sovereign master's care and order.
Exactly.
But the devastating irony of the fall sits right inside that mandate.
Oh, it really does.
Mankind was given absolute dominion over all creatures. They represented the apex of the earthly order.
Right.
Yet it was through submitting to a subordinate creature, the serpent, that man rebelled against God's established order.
It's tragic.
It is. The ruler took advice and instruction from the subject. The one given dominion yielded that dominion to an animal supposedly under his care.
It represents a total inversion of the very structure God set up in verses 5 and 6.
Total inversion. The software didn't just glitch.
Right.
It was maliciously recoded by the administrator handing over their password to a low-level program.
That is a perfect way to describe it. That inversion defines the essence of the fall.
Yeah.
Walvoord explains that because of this sin, because the representative man Adam broke the covenant and submitted to a subordinate creature, chaos flooded the system.
The system cried.
Right. The intended dominion over the earth has never been fully realized by finite man since that moment.
Harmony shattered.
Shattered completely.
I mean, we see brief, frustrating glimpses of our dominion.
Sure we do.
We build cities, we harness electricity, we study medicine, we split the atom.
Right. We do amazing things.
But the earth constantly pushes back.
Always.
We experience natural disasters, aggressive disease, crop failures.
And the ultimate undefeated enemy of physical death.
Right. The rule remains fractured because the ruler rebelled against the sovereign.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The noje, the mortal, weak man, failed to uphold the dignity of his position.
The earth no longer willingly submits to a ruler who refused to submit to God.
That's the core issue.
If the analysis stopped right there, it would be an incredibly depressing conclusion.
It would be awful.
It would be a story of immense potential squandered by a tragic mistake, leaving us in a permanent state of chaos.
Forever fighting against a planet that wants to kill us.
Right. But the biblical narrative and Walvoord's commentary do not stop in Genesis 3.
No, they don't.
To find the resolution to this broken dominion, we have to look at how the New Testament authors read Psalm 8.
And this is where it gets really good.
Walvoord points us to the fulfillment found in Hebrews chapter 2 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15.
Right.
The story of Psalm 8 remains incomplete until we introduce the last Adam.
Let's dig into Hebrews 2 first.
Okay.
The writer of Hebrews chapter 2 directly quotes verses 4 through 6 of this psalm, utilizing the Septuagint translation.
So he uses the word angels there.
Yes. He quotes the exact phrases. What is mankind? That you are mindful of them, and you made them a little lower than the angels.
Right.
And you crown them with glory and honor, and put everything under their feet.
Okay, so he's setting up the original design.
Exactly. But then the author of Hebrews looks at the world and agrees with our assessment.
What does he say?
He writes, "Yet at present we do not see everything subject to them."
He acknowledges the chaos.
He acknowledges the failure of the first Adam. He acknowledges the natural disasters and the disease.
He looks around and says, yeah, the system is broken.
Right. But then the writer of Hebrews pivots and makes a massive theological claim.
What is it?
He says, but we do see Jesus.
But we do see Jesus. Wow. The writer of Hebrews introduces Jesus not just as a savior from sin, but as the solution to the dominion problem.
Precisely.
I want to dig into how Jesus resolves the failure of the first Adam.
Okay.
How does he reclaim the specific mandate that was lost in the garden when Adam submitted to the serpent?
So Walvoord draws heavily on 1 Corinthians 15.45 and 47 here.
Okay, what does Paul say there?
The Apostle Paul explicitly identifies Jesus Christ as the last Adam.
The last Adam.
Yes. And this introduces the critical theological concept of federal headship.
Can you explain a federal headship for anyone who might not be familiar with that term?
Sure. The first Adam operated as the federal head, the official representative for all humanity.
Like an ambassador.
Right. When he failed, the consequences fell on all whom he represented.
His corrupted software downloaded to every subsequent human being.
Exactly. Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, enters history as the new representative, the last Adam.
Paul does not call him the second Adam.
Right, he calls him the last Adam.
Implying there will never need to be another.
Spot on. Where the first mortal Adam failed and brought chaos by submitting to the serpent, the last Adam succeeds perfectly. Jesus lived a life of complete unyielding obedience to the Father. He never inverted the hierarchy.
Never.
And throughout his earthly ministry, we see him exerting perfect dominion over the physical world.
That is a fascinating way to read the Gospels.
It changes everything.
When Jesus calms the storm on the Sea of Galilee, he isn't just showing off.
No.
He exercises the dominion over nature that Adam lost. When he casts out demons, he exercises dominion over the spiritual chaos. When he heals the sick and raises Lazarus from the dead, he exercises dominion over the ultimate consequence of the fall, mortality itself.
He operates as the true and better Yanosh, who perfectly fulfills the mandate of Psalm 8.
Wow. The first Adam was made a little lower than God, given dominion, and lost it through pride.
Yes.
Jesus, the eternal Son of God, willingly makes himself a little lower than the angels by taking on human flesh.
Taking on that physical frailty.
Right, so that he could suffer death and reclaim the lost dominion through humility.
That completely reorganizes how we understand the incarnation.
It really does.
Christ took on the vulnerability of the infant mentioned in verse 2 to silence the enemy.
Wow. That brings us right back to the beginning of the psalm.
It does. And Walvoord concludes his analysis by looking toward the future culmination of this reality.
Because we don't see it fully realized yet.
Right. Christ currently sits at the right hand of the Father, crowned with glory and honor. But we still live in the tension of the already and the not yet.
Explain that tension.
Well, Christ has already secured the victory. The checkmate has been called.
Going back to the chess analogy.
Right. But the final, physical subjugation of all things awaits his return.
When Christ returns, the promise of Psalm 8 will be visibly and globally realized.
Yes. All things will be completely subjected to him.
He will bring God the Father's intended plans for creation to total, unbroken fulfillment.
The dominion that fractured in Eden will be perfectly restored under the reign of the Son of Man.
The earth will finally be managed by a human who perfectly reflects the sovereign master.
It's an incredible hope.
That certainty changes how we interact with the text.
Absolutely.
And it changes how we interact with our own daily lives.
It has to.
Because history is not just a chaotic downward spiral of human failure. I mean,
Right.
when you watch the news or look at the brokenness in your own community or deal with sickness in your own body.
It's easy to get discouraged.
It is. It is easy to feel like the original design of Psalm 8 is a lost cause. But history is actually a story anchored by the last Adam reclaiming the dominion that was lost.
The outcome is absolutely certain.
It is. Let's look at the very end of the psalm, verse 9, because David brings the whole song full circle.
Right, back to the bookends.
Yes.
Walvoord points out that the song closes with the exact same expression of praise for God's majestic name with which it began.
O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth.
But when you read verse 9, after walking through the entire progression, after seeing the weakness of the infant silencing the enemy, the vastness of the cosmos as mere fingerwork,
The staggering dignity of the original design.
the reality of the fall,
Mm-hmm.
and the ultimate victory of the last Adam,
Right.
that final exclamation of praise carries immense theological weight.
It means so much more now.
God's majesty is not just displayed in the stars.
No.
His majesty shines most brilliantly in his care, his design, and his redemption of finite, fragile man.
The bookends of majesty hold together a story of unbelievable grace.
He really did.
It changes the way you look at the night sky.
I agree.
We started by moving from God's cosmic majesty to his unexpected use of mortal weakness, that noj. We examine the tragedy of mankind yielding their God-given dominion to a serpent in the garden.
Glitching the operating system of the world.
Exactly. And we finally landed on the ultimate victory secured by Jesus Christ, the last Adam, who perfectly fulfills the mandate of Psalm 8.
A beautiful picture.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Something to take with you into your week. We established that Jesus Christ, the last Adam, has already perfectly fulfilled God's mandate for dominion.
Right.
He is ruling right now as the true and perfect human.
Yes.
So if that is true, how does recognizing his current sovereign rule shift the way you handle your own daily tasks?
That's a great question.
If the sovereign master has already reclaimed the earth, how does that change the way you manage the small plot of ground he has entrusted to you?
Right.
Whether you are managing a spreadsheet, raising a toddler, or planting a garden, you are participating in a dominion that has already been secured by the last Adam.
Amen to that.
Thank you for joining this deep dive on Reformed thinking.